Hello, everyone, and welcome in to CrushTheStreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri. We got a first-time guest on today. His name is Chris Duane. And you know what? Today we're going to talk about America's next tribulation. And he's done some interesting research on this and how the country just has changed cyclically over a period of 80 years. He's a smart economist. He's an articulate educator. His website is silvershieldexchange.com. Chris, thanks for coming on the line with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Chris, we're going to get into a few things today. We're even going to talk about Bitcoin and your thoughts on that. I know it's controversial, especially here. We've been promoting it a lot, so I'm looking forward to getting to that. But before we do, let's start off with this America's next tribulation and some of the insight that you've been educating your audience about.
Yeah, I've done. Before I came onto the scene, I read almost 250 books trying to understand how the world worked. I was, a successful multimillionaire by the time I was 30 years old, and, it just felt like something was wrong. And in 2008, from 2005 to 2008, I read over, probably 250 books at that time, understanding the scary fact that our money is debt and debt is money, and our world revolves on it, and it's not a pretty picture. And in my studies, I came across Nikolai Kondratiev, who was I believe, a Russian economist during Stalin's time. That noticed in the cyclical nature of economies, and that he actually, I think, went to the Gulag because Stalin didn't like that, because the all-powerful state could override all economic cycles, and Kondratiev was like, no. But that work has been, used many different times by many other economists who've seen cyclical cycles. The Rothschilds are very well known for using sunspot cycle to predict economic activity. The more sunspots, the more heat, the longer growing season, the more human activity, more growth. And then when there's less sunspots, like we're entering now, we're actually going to have a minimum, solar minimum coming up over the next, I think, 10 years. There's going to be less economic activity, less heat, less growing seasons, and a slowing of economic activity. Then I got to Strauss and Howe with their Fourth Turning book, which is probably the most influential book I've read in my research, that give the cyclical nature of history that rides upon the economic cycles. And they made a very strong case that for every 80 years or 4 generations, the system binges and purges itself and is created new again. So in this video I just did, America's Tribulation, I said that every 80 years the United States has changed into something different. And I said, you can go back 80 years from now, and we had the Great Depression and World War II, and 80 years before that, we had the Civil War, and 80 years before that, we had the Revolutionary War. And from the Revolutionary War, we got out of, the European monarchy, serfdom type system into, a constitutional republic and democracy. And that lasted for 80 years, and then we got into the Civil War, and the Civil War went on to be, getting rid of states' rights and establishing what I believe is the federal tyranny, where the federal government now is the power in the land, and had nothing to do with the local states or their rights or what the revolution was all about. And then 80 years beyond that, you had this, centralized economy that kept, growing, for the wealthy. And it eventually led to a rich man's panic on Wall Street that destroyed the entire economy of the United States in the Great Depression and World War II. And that was only saved by us basically bombing the hell out of every other economic competitor in the world, namely in Europe and Asia, in World War II. And we were able to come out of that a completely different nation. Now we were one in which the military-industrial complex, federal government, banking, petrodollars, all these things that we're currently living with and profited off of have been going on for, essentially 80 years. And Strauss and Howe made a point that the 2008 financial crisis is the beginning of the fourth. And then there's four turnings inside each of those 80-year cycles. So, the first 20 years is kind of the spring of the economy where the new system is born and there's all this growth and rejuvenation. Then the summer comes where it matures, and then the fall comes, another 20 years, and then there's this decay and slowdown, and then winter comes, like the Game of Thrones. Well, our winter of this cycle started with the financial crisis in 2008, and they're predicting that it won't be over until 2024, 16 years from the time that has happened, which leaves us only 7 years or so of this past, of that time period that's left. And since 2008, there has been no repercussions. Nobody went to jail, no structural reform, none of the debts were washed away. So we haven't even felt the pain yet of this crisis, and that's what I believe is coming over the next 7 years.
Wow. Yeah, so we're there essentially. We're right in the heart of that time frame. And it'd be really interesting to see how this plays out. It's been interesting, of course, watching what happened in 2008 and them reflating everything, and to be where we are now, really with the central bankers unable to move without seeing some massive repercussions. So definitely at a pivotal time here. Most people in the precious metals community like both gold and silver. Now, you've placed your bets essentially 100% into silver, and I think in a previous interview you said you only own 1 ounce of gold. Yeah. So let's just talk about this. What's your general premise surrounding the silver bet?
Well, the way I look at it is silver, it's, essentially silver versus the world. Like, I can't find another asset class that offers, that's undervalued, unloved, it's the second most versatile commodity in the world next to oil. And I'm a firm believer that we're going to have the death of oil, at least in my lifetime, and that the economies that would thrive coming out of the petrodollar era would be ones that would use technology, and silver is vital for that. It is the second most used commodity next to oil. It is unloved. It's used in energy, science, technology. Our way of life is totally not sustainable without the use of silver, and yet it's treated like garbage. Gold, you bring up gold. To me, gold is relatively overvalued to silver. Gold is relatively undervalued to just about every other asset out there, but next to silver, it stands in stark contrast. I think right now it's trading at 72 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold, and yet it comes out of the ground at a 1-to-9 ratio, meaning that there's 9 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. So right off the bat, just dealing with how nature deals with it, silver should be 8 times higher today to be relative to gold in price. That said, there's also probably 6 times more physical ounces of gold above ground, because gold throughout all of history has been treasured and stored and taken care of. And silver throughout all of history, of recent history of this past, industrial use, has been used and abused as an industrial metal and thrown away in such small quantities it'll never be found again, leaving the stockpiles above ground rapidly depleting. I think at one point in 1950, the United States government alone owned 5 billion ounces of silver, and today they own, whatever's used in the Silver Eagle program on a rolling basis. So there's major stockpiles have been depleted, and yes, they've mined more, but so have the uses of silver, and not enough of it is being put into coin form, which would be storable, and a grand majority of it. I mean, my wife just bought yoga pants with silver in it. She'll probably get a year out of it and throw it out. Now it's a minuscule amount, but there's billions of people out there, so everybody using these little bits, and it's not recoverable after that. So,
and I think you said
that's why I like it. I mean, it's a long-term play for me. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is, seeing where the world goes and understanding that the greatest wealth is always made in the transferring of wealth. And these Kondratiev cycles will show, every 20 years or so, these things change. And, the right now, the cycle, whether, people see it or not, it is to gold, it is to real tangible assets, it's to silver. And when the market breaks and you get, like we've seen in the Great Depression and, many times before, you will get a 1-to-1 gold to Dow Jones ratio. And at that point, that's when you switch out of your physical assets into rapidly underappreciated stocks and properties that are trading at single-digit multiples, if that. And that, to me, is where the biggest wealth is going to be made. But you have to make it through to that point. You can go chase all these, gamblings and, IPOs and ICOs and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, when it really matters, all those markets are going to be crashing. And what's going to matter is what you have physically in your possession, and even then you may have to wait 2 to 3 years for it to be safe, because the unraveling of this global generational debt-based Ponzi scheme is not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be quick.
Chris, I think it was you that said in one of your latest videos that the banking system, the effort they put into manipulating the silver price is to the tune of $5 trillion. Can you speak on $5 trillion a year? Can you speak to that before we move on to the next topic?
When I first saw it, it was a Bloomberg article. They've archived it, but there's been many other sites that have mirrored that. But yeah, essentially that they trade $5 trillion worth of paper silver on top of, 1 billion ounces that are mined every year, 800 million ounces that are mined every year, and not every ounce of silver goes into the markets. Some of them are actually, companies buy directly from the mines, or they have private contracts and stuff. So the I don't know if it's 100 or 1,000 times more paper silver is traded on these markets, and that's what determines the paper price of it. And that's why silver has been crushed repeatedly for as long as it has. The only time it ran up recently was when Bear Stearns was short silver, and they went out of business. Silver went from $7 to $21 in March of 2008, I think it was, and it just totally crushed Bear Stearns. Prior to, this was 6 months prior to the financial collapse, and J.P. Morgan stepped in, bought Bear Stearns at $2 a share, and then drove silver all the way down from $21 to $8. And then just as the financial crisis started, that's when silver ran up from $8 to $50. And then, since then, we've been in a 6-year bear market in silver, because these guys with, unlimited amount of money can throw unlimited amount of contracts during the most illiquid periods of times and crush it. And then this has been admitted. They've had traders that have, been caught. They'll get a few $100,000 fine, but that's just the cost of doing business to them.
Okay, guys.
So how does it end? So people go, Chris, how they can do this forever. I even heard Paul Craig Roberts say, the Fed can continue to do this forever. Like, no, it can't. The Kondratiev cycle, the fourth turning, things that cannot go on forever won't. And usually when things seem most bad, that's when they're most vulnerable, because everybody's thinking the same way. And it doesn't take much for things to start turning sideways, and then the whole ship turns over.
Well put, Chris. Okay, guys, so we've had a lot of people on the show that have been very pro Bitcoin, pro cryptocurrency, and I wanted to have someone on that has a different opinion and to kind of see both sides of the coin here. And Chris has been very vocal about his stance on cryptocurrency and what he ultimately thinks they're worth, which is essentially nothing. So, Chris, having said that, just as an introduction to your point of view on cryptocurrency, what you're noticing, let's get some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I've been at this since 2012. I've talked to lead developers of Bitcoin, Gavin Anderson. I spoke to him for an hour, back in 2012, when most of the people that are coming into cryptos now don't realize back in 2011, 2012, 2013, there was a huge push to get influential people on YouTube, and I was very outspoken with Silver at that point to, come into the fold, come into the cryptocurrency. Look at this. It's decentralized. It's private. It's, it's against the bankers. Come on. And I kept looking at it, and I talked to a lot of people, and I kept getting pressure, and I'm like, no, this is a Ponzi scheme. because they essentially take something that has admittedly no value. I mean, I talked to Gavin Anderson back when Bitcoin was worth nothing, and he says that it doesn't have any value. It's just what people feel it's worth. Take something that has essentially no intrinsic value. They build up the perceived value with all this hype and hoopla. It's going to go to 10,000. It's a million. It's going to, have a quarter of the GDP. The FX market's $4 trillion a day. So even if we get, like all this ridiculousness, and they build up the perceived value of it. Well, then people start rushing in and giving more money, real wealth, into buying up this. And, essentially at some point, it's going to realize that Bitcoin only does 7 transactions per second. It's this blockchain's getting larger. It's taking up more energy. The transaction times and costs are going up. Visa does 40,000 transactions per second. It can't really be used as a currency because it doesn't even function that well. And to me, it's a speculative asset that people are building up into this, digital messiah. And it's coming at the cost of the real solution, I believe, which is physical silver. I just did a video about how the United States Silver Eagle sales for the month are 235,000 ounces. I mean, this was, years of doing between 2 and 4 million ounces a month. And now the United States Mint is only doing 235,000 ounces.
So just to jump in right there. So you believe that cryptocurrency is actually distracting people from physical precious metals.
Oh, yeah. And it's doing it in the same way that when the silver ETF came out, it was the banksters that came out with that saying, hey, you like silver, here, buy this silver ETF. It's just as good as silver. And, they say that they have all these millions of ounces of silver. And, at the end of the day, I don't believe that they have any silver there either. So cryptos are doing to the precious metal market, which they're spending $5 trillion a year just on silver to suppress, which is a real tangible threat to this global digital Ponzi scheme, because all these assets out there, stocks, bonds, real estate, private wealth, currencies, and now cryptos, they're all digital illusions of wealth. And, even real estate, if we didn't have 30-year mortgages, these 30-year debt instruments, what's your house worth? It's not worth $500,000 because nobody's got that in cash. It would probably be worth 10 cents on the dollar. But the silver and gold are the only real assets that stand in stark contrast to this. And I get why everybody wants this party to continue. It's fun, you get to make a lot of money and buy, more stuff that you don't need with money you don't have. Like, that's what our system is built off of. 70% of the United States economy is built off of consumerism. Who wants to see that end? But at some point it will. This isn't a system that can go on forever. And when it does, it will lead to the single largest transfer of wealth from intangible illusions of wealth into real tangible things. And you can get to the point where, like in Zimbabwe, 3 eggs are worth, 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. Like, look at Venezuela. I mean, really study Venezuela right now. The amount of human pain that's going on there is serious. I mean, I think I read that the average Venezuelan has lost 20 pounds in this past year because they're starving.
Wow.
And that's a nation that is going through a hyperinflation, and that's when in 2008 the smart move was to get into cash, right? Like, sell all the stocks and bonds and real estate and get into cash. When we're dealing, and that was an institutional crisis, that was banks that went bad with some bad bets, and the smart move was the overall system was working, get into cash. And this time, I believe that this problem is at a global sovereign debt nation. And what do those global sovereign debt nations have? The ability to print more money. And I think that having cash, having stocks, I mean, the Venezuelan stock market's the best performing stock market in the world right now because of the hyperinflation. But at the real tangible wealth level, go trade that for eggs and you won't be able to get it. And I think that's just a taste of what kind of change has to come during these next 7 years.
Yeah, a lot to talk about there. Interesting point on Venezuelans losing 20 pounds. I mean, that's a serious thing for if it is related to the economy, and I'm sure it is.
I saw a lady in a picture. She looked as if she was 65, and she was my age. She was 43 years old.
Wow.
Just emaciated, life sapped out of her. And that's what I'm most concerned about. Like, right now, all the lights are on. We got pizza and iPads, and, things are okay. But I store, 1 million calories of food. I think men need to do this, 'cause this isn't something, the ladies out there are going to go, I'm not going to go to Target today. I'm going to go stock some dehydrated food. But men really need to get real about what is coming. Even look at these cryptos, man. Like, you're not going to get the average person out there to even understand what a Bitcoin is. I even tried explaining it to my 11-year-old daughter, and she's like, wait a minute, Dad. And I give her a silver coin. I'm like, what would you rather have? Like me writing down these little digits and then, you're going to go work for that? Or do you want this ounce of silver? She's my daughter. Of course she's going to take silver. But when things do matter, I don't even think the dollar, which is widely accepted all over the world, will be, a currency that will have purchasing power at the end of the day, because the government's going to continue to print more and more money. I got Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke. They say, we can print unlimited amount of money. You can promise any amount of money, but we cannot guarantee their purchasing power. And that, to me, is them screaming, when push comes to shove, they're going to destroy the currencies. And when the currencies don't work, the banking system don't work, these online exchanges won't work, and power will devolve down to the most local and responsive level. And to me, I think owning old silver dimes, silver quarters, will get you through that tough 2-3 year period. And then afterwards, what wealth will be left to create and buy land, businesses, all these assets when the smoke clears? Because that's when I would be, investing, when the smoke clears. And to me, I think silver is going to provide the most purchasing power, for that greatest transfer of wealth.
Yeah, that is the ultimate, obviously, doomsday scenario, and I see that it's definitely possible. So just want to extrapolate the decentralized network a little bit, and just your thoughts here on Bitcoin. So you don't believe that network that Bitcoin has, that decentralized network itself, is worth anything? The fact that people can transfer money from place to place. Obviously, a lot of people are jumping in now because of its speculative potential. Yeah. But there was a underlying value that people have fallen in love with that eventually took it to where it is now, and then obviously it's going parabolic.
Yeah, I don't buy that whole, let's transfer money all over the world, because I think that benefit that was pushed out there will ultimately be the poison pill. Right now there's in the Senate a bill that's putting cryptocurrencies in anti-money laundering laws, which, the gold and silver dealers have already had to deal with, and so has the banks. And that is exactly what they use to destroy the private Swiss banking system. So, now you can say, you can transfer wealth, across borders for, very little fees, which those fees are going up, and it's taking longer to, actually transact, because it can only do 7 transactions per second. And the blockchain's getting bigger, and at some point it'll reach, 100 gigabytes, and, then you're going to have to store it on some huge mainframe. I mean, it's like literally set up to destroy itself at some point, just because it won't be able to use. But before then, the governments are going to use anti-money laundering laws that you buy or sell Bitcoin, even locally, you're exposing yourself to being a money launderer, a terrorist financer, whatever things they want to use. Bernard von Nothaus, the old guy who's making the Liberty Dollar. I mean, the FBI destroyed him for counterfeiting, because he used dollar on silver coins. I mean, what do you think they're going to do when they tie the next, fake false flag ISIS attack on, some Bitcoin that was transferred? It's going to give them every excuse to go in there. The FBI has admittedly been in Coinbase for 3 freaking years now. Like, they have all this information on everybody who's owned any crypto. There was a neurologist in Arizona. I mean, he's a neurologist. Do you think he's got a good life before Bitcoin? Well, they just destroyed him for selling, I think, $35,000 worth of Bitcoin to an undercover FBI agent, and he has an unlicensed exchange. Like, there's real dangers out there, and it's not even like, they shut down Bitcoin and we're going to have another thing. No, they're going to use anti-money laundering laws, and now it's criminal. Now it's civil asset forfeiture. Like, I'm paying $3,000 in Bitcoin. Yeah, you might lose your Bitcoin, but now you also expose yourself to civil asset forfeiture and literally lose everything, because now it's part of this, drug network. I mean, the government purposely does this. Like, they say, you're the worst human being on earth because, like Bernard von Otthaus, like, he made Liberty dollars, so they destroyed him. So when the time does come, and it's coming, because they're going to roll out a cryptocurrency to blockchain humanity. They're going to, every piece of land is going to have a blockchain to it. Every stock is going to be a blockchain. Goldman Sachs just came out with their blockchain stocks, and they're going to use that. But when that does happen, that's when they're going to destroy all these open sourced, libertarian, things, and destroy all the competition, because they don't want competition. They never want that. And I think they're going to use the anti-money laundering laws, and I think the downside exposure way outweighs any potential upside, especially at these bubble prices. Like, anybody coming into Bitcoin now at $4,000, like, it's a long way back down to zero. And the idea that it's going to keep going up, entails that somebody else is going to keep buying into it. And I've made the case that, why would anybody with any money go and buy Bitcoin when they can go create their own crypto Ponzi scheme? Like the guy from Goldman Sachs came out with, I forget what it was called, but he had an ICO of $200 million. Like, he didn't have to invest money into Bitcoin to hopefully have it go from 4,000 to 4,400. He just came out with his own open source, crypto, and cashed in $200 million out of thin air. And my belief is, when a few get something for nothing, the rest, all you guys, are going to be left with nothing for something. So I tell people, I said, look at it. Don't confuse gambling and luck with investing in intelligence. Like, if you made money on these cryptos, great. Don't forget the cash out. And if you want to leave some of, play with the house money, it's the exact same thing as Vegas. But at the end of the day, you got to have the real tangible wealth, or else I can't imagine how bad people are going to feel when this greatest transfer of wealth, this Kondratyov cycle, this tribulation, whatever you want to call it, you're going to want what's real, not some digits scribbled on a piece of paper to keep it safe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess I was going to ask you a little bit about that. I mean, there's been no history in which people haven't called Bitcoin a bubble, but you really got into some underlying threats, like really the government enslaving people and getting people and trapping people and then losing everything, which, again, that trumps everything. But assuming, it's traded and treated normally, I don't know how we want to define that. But
why would you assume that? I mean, they're spending $5 trillion a year, suppressing silver. They have the plunge protection team to pop up stocks. Like, it doesn't benefit them to have outside currencies, doing this. And they'll let it go for a while. They will, and that's how the FBI works. They let these things go for a while, and God, if you've ever had an account on Coinbase, you've already been exposed, as far as I'm concerned.
I actually tend to see the potential in that, and I've been asking some of the people that I've been interviewing, what is the government's response? What are they going to do? Because to me, it seems like they can't control Bitcoin at this point. They can't.
Of course they
it's
can.
Decentralized, and they haven't come out and made it.
How many people does it take to arrest? They got one Russian dude out in Greece, $4 billion. BitX, or I don't keep up with all these names. I just look at this, go, oh, here goes another one. Here goes another $4 billion Russian guy out in Greece. They arrested him, and then they held all those funds. And then anybody who's got the funds there, they're like, oh, we're gonna give it back to you. Like, all it takes is just to walk in, and the FBI's already been in Coinbase for 3 years, which, if that doesn't scream like they're just waiting to see who's using it, where it's going, financing. They do a lot of research into where the money's going and stuff like that, and it's all tracked and traced. Like, there's no oh, I didn't get it, like silver, I had a boating accident, I sold all my silver because I was smoking coke and cracking hookers in Vegas. No, if it comes to you, that's it, it's tracked to you. And that to me is the real threat of this. Forget about the whole speculative part of it. Where is this going for humanity? That the bankers want to monetize, enslave, put everybody into debt, and this is their wet dream. And the whole truth movement has sold their soul and integrity, blinded by making some profits and thinking that it's decentralized and very libertarian. And at the end of the day, this is the exact technology that the bankers and the oligarchs want to enslave all of humanity, to track, to trace, to tax all of human existence. When Al Gore came on the scene talking about, man-made global warming, it had nothing to do with the weather and had everything to do with the carbon-based Ponzi scheme that they would come out, that they would force corporations and governments to buy these limited amount of carbon credits to squeeze, humanity, that it would cost more money to use that. And when Al Gore, the whole man-made global warming was found out to be a complete fraud, Bitcoin pops on the scene almost the same month as the financial crisis. Kind of makes you curious, right?
Well, guys.
And on top of that, The Economist magazine in 1988, which is a Rothschild-owned, and if you don't know the Rothschilds, you better, because they own all the central banks in the world, and they're real owners of the world. But they predicted 2018 there was going to be this new global currency, and they show the fiery of all the global currencies and a phoenix rising out of it, and around its neck is this big zero, which to me looks like a digital thing of nothing. And so that's where I'm intellectually, I was intellectually and morally opposed to all these cryptos before, before it became popular, back in 2012. I don't care about the value that you think that you're going to get, because to me the downside of the liability of even owning these with the governments using anti-money laundering laws and stuff like that far exceeds any upside potential. But even on a moral basis, this is exactly what the banksters want. Why would I want to be like them? I've spent my whole life trying to get out from underneath them and create a better way of life, and this is not tied to me at all.
All right, guys. Well, hey, this was exactly why I wanted Chris to come on the show and to give us, the other side of the coin and the concerns about Bitcoin. And we even talked about, what the potential of the government involvement with Bitcoin and some of these cryptocurrencies could be. But I think Chris really went down this rabbit hole and is showing us some real potential concerns for the cryptocurrency. Chris, thanks for coming on the show with me today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to having you on in the future. If people want to learn more about your work, your website, where would they go and what would they find?
Well, I'm probably best known for my YouTube channel, which is The Greatest Truth Never Told. I think it's now going on its 6th or 7th year. We had 138,000 subscribers, and I talk about silver history, economics, politics, everything, and but always try to give a different perspective. And I find that I'm a very lonely voice out there on many popular issues, including cryptos. And then if you're interested in what I actually do for a living, which is design and sell silver coins, I've aligned my passion and beliefs with my with what I do, which is very rare. You can go to silvershieldexchange.com. To me, I design what I believe is historically significant silver designs that are only available for a week at a time, and it's just been a tremendous way of investing in silver for $2 to $3 over spot, and then the collector's values on eBay almost double in value on every single one that I do because they're very low mintages, unique designs, and there's a growing collector base out there for them. So if you're interested in that, you can go to silvershieldexchange.com, and that's it.